The incident began in a remote stretch of arid land where a wandering camel was discovered in a condition that left even experienced rescuers stunned. Local herders first noticed something unusual when they saw the animal struggling to move, its gait uneven and its posture tense, as if weighed down by something more than exhaustion. When they approached, they realized the camel's body was covered in thick masses of honeycomb, the waxy structures clinging to its coat like hardened armor. Bees had swarmed around the animal at some earlier time, building extensive combs that trapped dust, debris, and moisture against its skin. The weight of the honeycomb made it difficult for the camel to lift its neck or turn its head freely. Even more troubling were the clusters of barnacle-like growths and parasitic infestations embedded into its skin, especially along the legs and underbelly. Although barnacles typically attach to marine animals, the term was used by the rescuers to describe the hardened, crusted lesions that had formed due to long-term parasitic activity. The camel's fur was patchy, irritated, and raw in places, evidence of months of discomfort that had gradually weakened the animal. News of the distressed camel reached a local rescue team known for responding to unusual wildlife emergencies. They traveled to the site equipped with medical supplies, protective clothing, and tools for safely removing the honeycomb structures. When they arrived, the camel stood trembling, clearly exhausted and in pain but still alert enough to react to the presence of humans. The team approached slowly, speaking softly to avoid causing panic. The first step was to calm the animal and assess the extent of its injuries. They discovered that beneath the honeycomb, the camel's skin was inflamed and infected from prolonged exposure to the sticky residue and the swarming insects that had been nesting there. The parasites had caused deep irritation, and some wounds were beginning to show early signs of secondary infection. Time was critical. The rescuers secured the camel gently, ensuring it could not injure itself during treatment. They then began the delicate process of removing the honeycomb layer by layer. The hardened wax had to be softened with warm, sterile water before it could be peeled away without tearing the camel's sensitive skin. It was a slow and careful operation, taking hours of patience. As the honeycomb was removed, the team could better examine the parasitic lesions. The camel winced at times, but the presence of calm, practiced hands seemed to reassure it. Once the honeycomb was cleared, the rescuers cleaned the affected areas thoroughly and applied soothing antiseptic solutions to prevent infection. They trimmed away any damaged fur and sterilized each wound. For the parasitic infestations, they administered appropriate medication to kill the remaining organisms and stop further spreading. The camel, though weakened, remained cooperative through most of the process, as if sensing that these strangers were helping rather than harming it. After the physical treatment, the team focused on the camel's hydration and nutrition. They provided clean water and a small amount of easily digestible food, careful not to overwhelm the animal's system after what was likely a period of limited access to resources. As the camel slowly regained strength, its movements became steadier, and a visible calm began to settle over its posture. The rescuers continued monitoring its breathing, temperature, and responsiveness. Their goal was not only to treat the injuries but also to ensure the camel was stable enough to be transported to a rehabilitation center where it could receive longer-term care. Transporting the animal required coordination and gentle handling. Once loaded onto the rescue vehicle, the camel leaned its head slightly, no longer weighed down by the honeycomb that had restricted it for so long. When they finally reached the rehabilitation area, veterinarians performed a more comprehensive examination. They confirmed that with proper care, rest, and ongoing treatment, the camel would make a full recovery. The rescue team's efforts had prevented what could have been a slow and painful decline. In the days that followed, the story of the camel spread among local communities, not as a tale of tragedy but as an example of compassion and determination. The animal's recovery became a symbol of what can be achieved when people act with empathy and take responsibility for the well-being of creatures that cannot speak for themselves. The camel, once burdened and suffering, now stood as a reminder that even the most unusual and severe situations can be overcome with patience, skill, and kindness.